Well, as Justice Zondo still shares his vision of how we will head the Apex Court, joining us now to discuss this is Zikhona Ndlebe, the researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. Zikhona, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Good evening.
Now, first of all, what's your impression of Justice Zondo's interview and his vision for the country's judiciary? From what you've heard, does he have what it takes to lead the country's Apex Court?
Well, I think that's a very tricky question because the acting Chief Justice is already in the leading position because he is an acting Chief Justice. And I think that Commissioner Malema asked a very valid question, which is that the acting Chief Justice is in the acting position. So they would have expected him to say that I have done ABCD already. And if I am appointed, I am going to continue doing ABCD. But what he has done, acting Chief Justice Zondo, he has told the Commission of the various issues that exist within the judiciary and how he would like to see those issues resolved, such as court infrastructure, the Office of the Chief Justice becoming a fully independent department of its own. So those are just a few of the things that he mentioned. Whether he has what it takes or not, it's a tricky question, as I've said, because he is already in the leadership position.
And having said that, Zikhona, would you perhaps agree to the popular narrative that Justice Zondo taking over the position of Chief Justice would be necessary to ensure leadership continuity within the upper echelons of the judiciary? I mean, is this criteria necessary, though? Should it be applied over the competence of the other candidates?
Well, some people would argue that because acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is already in the position, he should continue in that position. However, we have to understand that he is acting, and perhaps one of the other candidates might do a better job at being a Chief Justice. But then again, it goes back to the fact that the final decision is the President's decision, whether he appoints acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo as the permanent Chief Justice or he chooses the other candidates. But it is only fair that a criteria is applied to all the candidates because they are the President's nominees.
Zikhona, we're losing you.
Have interviewed by the JSC.
Okay, we had lost you there for a second, but Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandi Samaya just a couple of days ago, remember that she stirred the hornet's nest upon asked if South Africa is ready for a female Chief Justice, and she said that it's not a proper question to ask because it implies all sorts of negative things. Are you at all impressed, though, with how Justice Zondo handled the issue of transformation in the judiciary?
Well, a question of that nature was asked by Advocate Dalimbofu when he considered the fact that the advocates that were in the State Capture Commission were predominantly white. And Acting Chief Justice Zondo said that there's nothing that he could have done about that. But we still think that there is a lot that still needs to be done in terms of transformation in the judiciary. And the question whether South Africa is ready for the next for a woman Chief Justice, it is, as Justice Mandi Samaya said, it's an irrelevant question. South Africa has always been ready since the dawn of democracy to have a woman Chief Justice. South Africa is ready to have a woman president. So it's not the fact that a person is female or not. It is a fact that we considered because of the Constitution. But it's not a determining quality to become a Chief Justice. It is not just the fact that she's a woman that would imply that she has to be appointed as Chief Justice.
Now, let's talk about the significance or the importance of these interviews, Zikhona, that have been conducted in the past week. You will recall that the Judicial Service Commission's endorsement or a recommendation, perhaps, of a certain candidate to the President is not binding on the President, meaning that President Ramaphosa is legally entitled to ignore whatever recommendation and go on to appoint a candidate of his choice. Is it legally and morally fair to drag candidates over the coals when appointing when the appointing authority already has a candidate in mind?
So as Judges Matter, before the President actually chose to open up the appointment process of the next Chief Justice, we said that the appointment process should be open open to ensure that there's transparency. Because in terms of the Constitution, it is the sole discretion of the President to appoint as Chief Justice. The President appoints to a person and asks the JSC to interview that person without any form of transparency. So we've always advocated for an open process. So whether it is fair or not, we think that this process ensures transparency, because now we know what kind of candidates there are for the position of a Chief Justice, and we will know what kind of a Chief Justice there is, despite whether the President appoints one of the candidates or not. But probably the President will definitely appoint one of the candidates that have been interviewed. But we have more insight into the candidate that will be appointed. We will have more insight into who our Chief Justice is, because they would have undergone the scrutinizing process, not all alone, but with other people running for the position of Chief Justice.
All right, Zikhona, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for offering your analysis with us. That was Zikhona Ndlebe, researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter.